So let's talk now to the North Cornwall MP Scott Mann. It's a really difficult situation for any politician at the moment, with that balance between liberating people from lockdown gradually and actually keeping us safe and stopping the spread of the virus. And Scott has written to the Prime Minister, really expressing his feelings. Good morning, Scott. Just give us an outline of what you wrote to the Prime Minister.
Good morning, Julie. Yes, I wanted to try and outline the difficulties with our financial sectors here, with tourism and hospitality, and the kind of juxtaposition with Trelisk and the pressure on our health services here. To just make him aware that our economy is fundamentally based on what's going to happen in the summer months, but our health concerns, which are obviously a priority, still exist with our one hospital, and thank God, up to this point, Trelisk has coped exceptionally well, and I'd like to praise the NHS and everyone working in the NHS and the people in Cornwall and the wider Southwest who are all doing the right thing and protecting the lives at the moment. But we do have to think about the financial considerations of the tourism and hospitality sector as we go into what effectively would be their busiest period.
What's the answer, do you think? 24 hours ago, we heard on this programme from an academic in Scotland who has studied this and warned that if the lockdown is lifted in rural areas like Cornwall before there's a vaccine, it could be disastrous for the population. And on the other hand, I've heard from people in businesses who are absolutely desperate. How do we square that circle?
Yeah, so I think it needs to be done on a sector by sector basis. So there are some sectors in the economy who effectively could be lifted at quite an early stage, and I'm thinking more along the kind of lines of the building trades. Some of the things that can be done outside. If someone's got a pub with a beer garden, they could effectively open the beer garden. That kind of thing. I think the challenge comes with restaurants and pubs that don't have access to public open space. I think they could find themselves at the end of this. So I think it probably does need to be done on a sector-by-sector basis, with a gradual movement towards a full opening up at some point. But
it's tricky, though, isn't it? Because I'm thinking if you've got a beer garden, unless it's sort of the size of the Royal Cornwall Showground and people are 2 metres apart, you might not have enough customers to actually financially justify you being open.
And that's the problem. I think, how many businesses can work on a limited cash flow of, say, 30 or 40% for a period of time. A lot of the small businesses in Cornwall work on cash flows for 3 to 6 weeks. And, if when the furlough scheme eventually finishes, then they will need to hit the ground running. And if they're only at 40% revenue at that point, then it does present them with all sorts of financial challenges. But I don't see us opening up fully to tourism early on. I think that it will need to be very carefully considered, which was the purpose of my letter to the PM, to just outline, could we look at how we lift certain sectors at certain times. What I don't want is to see, a mass of people coming out of the cities and into Cornwall for the summer months, because I think that potentially would put us at huge risk in terms of our health provision.
Presumably, Scott, what you would like to see, in which case, because people can't live on thin air, you would like to see ongoing support for those in the tourism sector.
Yeah, I think that does need to be considered. It does need to be considered as we get into the next kind of 3, 4, 5 weeks. I think the government will need to look at specific sector-led approach to financial support. We've put measures in place for fisheries. There's ongoing work in the dairy sector at the moment to look at how we can support the people that are in financial hardship in the dairy sector. And I don't rule out an approach to the Treasury for a tourism bid as well. But we just need to, I think, look at the evidence, look at what we think might happen in the next 3 weeks, and then make a financial decision based on that through feeding in all the right data through the Treasury. But it's a really tough one, Julia. Really, really tough.
clearly the biggie here is that difficult decision about whether you head towards liberalising the lockdown and whether you go towards keeping the lockdown in place. But what other things are your constituents and various groups sending to you? What are their concerns that are coming in your postbox and your email inbox?
A lot of fear about going back to work and what that might look like. And I think we have to be brave there. You know, I had a chat with my family about, you know, my return to London, which will eventually happen. We're going back to Westminster. We're working remotely. In fact, I did my first remote vote last week as a practice. But eventually I'll need to step back into Westminster. And I think we need to be brave when we go back into the workplace, you know, to get the country moving again. People are writing to me about financial support for small businesses. So a lot of them weren't able to access the original banking scheme that was put in place. So we fed that back into the Treasury. We managed to secure a small business package for loans up to 50,000, which were underwritten by the government. And that's been particularly helpful. And also the grant scheme from the local authority. And there's a new announcement last night about additional support for local authorities to provide businesses, particularly B&Bs and businesses that fell between the cracks last